It's here at the Young Entrepreneurs Forum for the ACBC evening. We've had Mr. Ben Dingle, who was one of the founders of Sinlay Milk and now the CEO of Nuchev, and really tell us some amazing things. And can I ask, Ben, in your experience, what do Chinese consumers see as tangible or credible value in a product?
Well, I'll talk specifically to infant formula because that's the sector that we operate in, and the one word that sums up how they see value is the word trust. Increasingly these days, people understand and are interested in health and nutrition. There's a lot more focus today on what we eat and what we drink and the impact it has on our health. Now, if you transition to a mum thinking about what she's going to feed her baby, her focus is exponentially more centred when she's thinking about what she's feeding her baby. So trust is the number one criteria for her.
And we heard a few things earlier this evening about, for example, somebody just getting chosen by a distributor. And now that we're talking about the complexity of the market over the last 10 years as China's become proliferated with global brands pushing into the space and competing, as we go beyond Australia, for Australia's sake, I don't think those initial stories of luck are really going to happen. And you talked a few things about having basically doing things reasonable and doing things poorly. You mentioned a few steps about that would be involved in. What's the formula in your experience?
So I guess the formula is understanding that you don't need to be everywhere in China, and nor should you be, and you don't want to be everywhere in China. That you need to have a very compelling point of difference, because increasingly China's no different to other countries, and increasingly we're operating in a global marketplace, and the internet and e-commerce is making that a lot easier and a lot faster, and things are moving really quickly in that regard. So the formula is then to understand the value chain and how that works in the China market, and probably I guess secondary to that is aligning yourself against some key channel partners to ensure your business gets off to a good start.
I was fascinated when you talked about research design, because people say you need to do research. When you talk about research, what did you mean? The imperative for quality research?
I'm talking about understanding, getting very clear how the consumer sees value. That's why you do market research. So it's targeted at the consumer, which in our case is not our customer, because we sell to channel partners like retailers and distributors, and they then on-sell to the consumers. But the consumer's the one who sets how the spoils are shared across the value chain, and you need to understand how they see value, and that's why you do market research. It's very important to understand as a brand owner how the consumers see value and the key components of their decision making, their buying decision making.
And you talked about the research design as well, the importance of research design. What did you mean by that?
So simply what I meant was that when you do the research, you've got to make sure you're asking the right questions that will give you the right answers, the answers that you need to know about how that consumer sees value, and who in the case of baby formula, who influences her buying decision and to what extent influences her buying decision.
Beautiful. And you mentioned three elements that should never be underestimated in relation to entering the China market.
Did I mention three?
Three. Or even what comes to mind. Cost of brand building, competitor exposure, and then advocacy, I think it took us to.
Look, essentially what I was saying was that if you're a brand from an external market to China, do your homework in your home market. Become established there so that you can go to China with a credible, established brand. Nobody's going to be interested in you if you're a new brand with no traction in the market, because you don't have any legitimacy, you don't have any credibility. and they're not going to swing in behind your brand on the back of no tangible sales data. Far better to establish yourself in your home market and then go to China with runs on the board.
And in closing, what does it take to have your finger on the pulse?
I think finger on the pulse is it's a term I love to use. I guess firstly you've got to have the right attitude. So you've got to be prepared to listen to the signals that might not be so positive, and address those and dig deeper. Ask people what they mean. Ask people, if there's a change coming, what impact is that going to have on your business? I think it's very much building authentic relationships, because inauthentic, and let's use the word for real relationships, people actually communicate effectively. And when you get effective communication, you'll be likely to understand the changes that are beginning to happen in those marketplaces. And lastly, to get all those things happening, you've got to turn up and you've got to be there. Nobody's going to call you on the phone and tell you the latest and the greatest. You've got to get into the marketplace and experience for yourself what's changing and moving.
Okay. As you can see behind us, we're out of here, folks. So thanks very much, and thank you, sir, for sharing your journey and sharing your experience.
Thanks very much.